Hi, folks. Welcome back to Code and Concrete, where we share the latest trends and the stories of trailblazers in the built environment. I'm your host, Matthew Schneider, the CEO at Building Inc. I'm currently out of town. I'm on the road for Boston Blockchain Week, so I'm not in the usual setting and I'm a little overdressed, but I've got an extra special episode for you today. I'm bringing on Jackson Reiter, and he is actually the co-founder and COO of Realm. And this is, they're essentially building real estate's AI brain. So you can already tell that this is going to be an exciting episode. But he's got a degree in economics from NYU, a background leading performance marketing, and years of experience as a licensed agent in New York and New Jersey. Jackson has seen both the ground level pain points, and systemic inefficiencies of this industry. He and his founder, Evan Robinson, founded Realm to unify the fragmented real estate ecosystem, from commercial research to consumer home search, all in one intelligent platform. So he leads operations, product, and go-to-market strategy for to make finding homes and investing in property smarter and faster. Love that. Well, Jackson, welcome to the show.
Matt, thank you for having me. I could not have given a better introduction of myself if I tried, so I appreciate that.
Well, to be fair, you wrote it and sent it over to me, so you got to pat yourself on the back for that one.
There we go. I was hoping you weren't mentioning that part, but that works. But no, great to be here, and I'm glad that I was able to, though I am underdressed compared to you, I matched the flannel to your bow tie, so we're off to the races, I guess.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's great. I mean, we were just talking before the show started that we're speaking at events, teaching people about prop tech and the technologies that are coming out, and how lucky to have a medium like this, a podcast, where we can continue to share more knowledge and unpack what a real estate brain is and how AI and data are shaping the industry. But first, I want to talk about you. So,
sure.
How did you get into the whole entrepreneurial thing? What was your journey like? And, what was the tipping point that you eventually founded Realm?
Sure. I mean, we can go back. I won't give too much of a deep dive on all of the past little excursions I've had, but to give some context to the entrepreneur side of it, I grew up on a farm in New Jersey, and as such, needed some things to do. I guess my first business was at 11 years old, selling tomatoes out by the street side. Actually did well enough with that through all of middle school, I guess, as a kid, that saved up enough money to pay for my first year of college eventually. And I guess that kind of exit, I guess you could call that. It definitely kind of solidified and vindicated the idea of doing business for myself in my brain at an early stage. And just, it's been a progression since then of odd jobs during college. I was a musician professionally before going back to college, which I'll save the stories from that for another time. But during college, I got involved in a lot of startups here in New York City, got involved in performance marketing, understanding how the startup ecosystem works and how, venture funding turns into product, turns into outcome, and just really got hooked on it very early on. Had some great mentors at the companies I worked at. And then during COVID, like a lot of people, got my real estate license. I guess there was really only two options at the time. For people that were bored at home. It was either bake sourdough bread or get into real estate. I did both, but the real estate worked significantly better, as you can ask my parents, who were the sad beneficiaries of some very malformed sourdough loaves throughout that period. But I got started in real estate in New York City, renting apartments, doing that whole thing. Eventually got my license in New Jersey as well. Worked with a few first-time home buyers, and eventually graduated that into doing some advisory work and doing some actual brokerage deals on some investment properties as well. After that, got back into the startup game, knowing that there was going to be something in my future that would have to bridge the gap between startups and real estate. Didn't quite know what that was yet, but knew that was the direction I wanted to go. And as you mentioned, my co-founder, Evan, he was working at the time. We actually were roommates at the time, which is how this whole thing kind of spiraled into what it is today. He was working in politics and government. He was at Los Angeles City Hall and doing zoning. He worked on housing policy for a number of congressional campaigns. And so living together, myself coming from the on the ground real estate background, while he was working on kind of the high level, bird's eye view of the market, we had this sandwich view of what was going on in the industry, and kind of couldn't help but have these ongoing discussions about what problems there were and how to solve them. And eventually we kind of came up with a thesis of how to do that. And here we are today.
Well, that's a perfect segue. So let's talk about what some of those problems are and how you've gone about solving them. And in particular, why you think AI is the best solution.
Sure, man. The problems in real estate. It's
Well,
a
there's a
broad subject,
thousand,
but
but focus
yeah,
on a few.
of course, of course. Really, the biggest thing. I mean, you mentioned the data background and your particular interest in that. So maybe let's attack it from that direction. I guess kind of the macro view of it would be that real estate is an ecosystem. Properties have a life cycle. They have a cadence to them. There is a cyclical nature of it, right? But a lot of the solutions that were coming out with more traditional tech, from the early 2000s through up until a couple of years ago, even now, none of them seem to look at it as that ecosystem effect. They, founders would find one part of the real estate process and try to solve for that. And that worked for a while because real estate data, as you well know better than most anyone else, is so fragmented and so all over the place and so multifaceted. And so it was kind of like boiling the ocean to try and build a product that did fit that whole ecosystem. But the problem therein lies where these companies were solving for one piece of the pipeline and doing that very well sometimes, sometimes not. But because they were only on one section, it didn't solve the rest of it. In fact, a lot of times it created more problems for other pieces of the process. If you add tech that makes one part easier, the next part has no technology involved whatsoever, you actually make more steps transitioning from analog to digital to back to analog again, really, in a lot of cases. But really, the biggest thing, the way that we kind of approached solving it was first principles. We have to look at it as an ecosystem. Properties have that life cycle from development through the end user buying or renting it, and that happened to occur in our mind at the same time that AI was coming out. And the reason that we are using it is not because we should have AI in real estate just because. The purpose is that AI is the first version of the technology that's come about in the last 2 decades that has the ability to, at scale, search, distill, and work with these large disjointed data sets at scale to actually create a usable impact. And if you can do that, you can start building it for the entire life cycle, which is what I was talking about before. So the timing worked out right, both in the means of us identifying the problem and the technology being available to actually implement and solve it.
I agree 100%. And I point this out to people. It's not that we have built everything stupidly and we can't get a clue about how the industry should operate. But what we're really realizing with all this innovation is the scale element, whether that's across efficiencies or the aggregation and processing of information. Like it's really almost like a hockey stick, right? What do you call that? Exponential, right? So you're seeing such an acceleration of the collection of information and then the outputs that can be done with that. And it previously wasn't possible before. We didn't have the computing power and then the energy to supply all of the data centers that are running all of that. So I think from the beginning of time, we've had the concepts that we want buildings with longevity. We want them to be designed intelligently, data-driven, human-centric, but we just did not have the tools. And now we do, and that's why it feels so revolutionary. But you pointed something out that the way that the technology is being implemented is also in a fragmented process. It's interjected in some areas because you can build a niche solution, but given how many problems are in the industry, it's really hard to create something that's wide sweeping, right? All encompassing, essentially. And this introduces new points of friction and additional disconnect. So I want to circle back to what you were talking about that. Where do you feel that a lot of this disconnect is emerging, and what do people misunderstand about whether they're operators or technologists or founders, right? What are we misunderstanding about how we're applying technology solutions and maybe creating more disconnect within the prop tech vertical or real estate
Sure.
industry?
I think it does come back to the sake of sounding repetitive, but I'll double click into this a little bit more. the fact that nobody has really taken a holistic view of, like I said before, the life cycle of a property, whether that's a single family home or a giant commercial building in Midtown Manhattan. That's where it stems from, but more specifically about why we've seen more of that segmentation or fragmentation, creating more problems in the life cycle. I believe, and I can kind of back this up with my past experience, is that you have two types of prop tech founders. Prop tech being overarching for anything in real estate tech, right? You have the prop tech founders who worked in real estate in a specific capacity, whether it was an asset manager or a broker themselves or something like that, uh, and then transitioned into the industry to solve a problem that they saw in their particular role. Then you have the prop tech founders who just worked in tech and decided to try out real estate with tech, and they don't have a background in the industry itself. I mean, that's always a bad model for any kind of industry, right? You need to have the background and understand how things work on the ground for the end user before you can build a solution for it, unless it's some very low level, low lift, low impact product, which real estate is just about one of the most impactful things in the world. So that definitely doesn't work there. The problem with the previous real estate founders who transitioned from the market into technology to solve a problem, I believe, is that they only saw their jobs function. And it's a natural human proclivity to just look at our immediate problems rather than to see the entire view. This is why I mentioned so specifically earlier, my co-founder Evan and I having those kind of like opposing viewpoints of the market, with him in the government on housing and me on the ground being an agent. It was kind of the far ends of the spectrum, right? Very macro versus very micro. And because we had that kind of duality, I think we were able to see everything in between our two roles. And that's probably where we came out with this thesis of the solution has to be for the entire duration of the property life cycle, from buying the land to doing the construction or development feasibility study to the financial modeling to putting it on the market and getting people into the units. We were kind of forced by having these two like end poles of the market to see the entire duration in between. Whereas if it was just me starting this company, I probably would have built software for a real estate agent, which would be useful for them, but likely would cause headaches for anyone that wants to work with the real estate agents in the process. And that's where I think the problem with some of these founders comes in.
Yeah, right off the bat, I think it forces a form of systems thinking. And we talk about this more and more in real estate, especially in the smart cities train of thought or school of thought, which is how we need to be cooperative. We need interoperability, and you need connection points between the software, but then also the built environment itself, because there's layers to this. There's the IT portion, which is what we're predominantly talking about here, but then how it actually shows up in the real world and what effect it has tangibly, because you're talking about software. Well, software might need scanners or IoT or things to be designed in a certain way so that it can reflect online. So just having everyone at the table so that we can have an open-minded, diverse perspective conversation about this, as cheesy as it sounds, in real estate, given its sophisticated and complex nature, it's a requirement. There might be other industries where you can get away with one person stepping in. And, I'm kind of thinking about like the iPhone. You got one visionary founder and they're going to disrupt everything. Well, you can't disrupt real estate. Like it's quintessential to the way that people live. It's where we live, how we work, play. So you can't just go in and like flip the whole industry upside down. There's too much at stake, too much involved. And it's so costly, right? So that being said, I want to insert realm here, because this is one of the things that you guys do, which is, as I interpret it, solving the siloed data problem. And I don't know if that's through a central repository. You'll enlighten us, or how you unify all of these moving parts. But how do you do that, and then also not make sure that you yourselves are not just another portal that people have to sign into?
Sure. So I guess the best way to conceptualize like how Realm is doing that and what it is at its core, and I'll click into this a little bit further too later about exactly what it does for a user on either side. But to think about it high level, it is, as you gave such a great introduction, which I, as you said, wrote. Um, it is real estate's AI brain. It's the backbone that sits across the supply and demand spectrum to allow every part to interact with the same platform. That's the core of it. And the way we do that is by being, I guess, the beachhead of that. How we're entering into that is our core competency right now, which both functionalities of the platform accomplish, which is being the best at doing any form of search or research in real estate. Specifically, the way we solve that and how that looks in practice is we have a whole agentic system at the core of this. It's many different models all operating together with each other to accomplish different goals. Real estate's extremely multifaceted, and so you need a lot of different specialized agents to actually do those functions and communicate with each other. So that's how we approach the technology side. And that bubbles up to a very seamless user experience on both sides, both the supply and the demand, but all feeding from the same models, the same data sets, and all of that. On the consumer side, which we launched first, is kind of the flagship product. It's a natural language home search. So if you as a renter moving to Boston or Atlanta or somewhere like that, you could simply go on Realm and in a natural language describe what it is you're looking for. I want a 2-bedroom with brick walls, views of the city, 2 blocks from a tequila bar, not too far from my office, and actually find it that way. There's really no limit to the level of detail that you can go into there. And we also, again, being really good at search, and this is going to play a role when I talk about the supply side of the market as well. I think you'll find this particularly interesting, Matt, given your background. We are very, very good at image search. So when you as the user are using our consumer site on Realm to find an apartment or a home, we're actually searching through the images of all the listings that are available on the market. That's how we're able to arrive at such a deep level of detail that doesn't have to be traditional tabular data. It's totally open vectorized search. So you can search for things as minute as show me apartments with a crack in the wall. That's not going to be in the description. You're not going to be able to search for that on Zillow, but we can find that because we are actually looking at every single visual, basically to be able to bridge the gap you were talking about, making sure that it's not just technology in a void, it's actually interacting with the real world in a meaningful way and the way that we live, work, and play in the built environment. So that's the consumer side. Good.
I was going to say it's really fascinating because what you've just described is the interpretation of unstructured data. Usually we need structured data. And if I'm going through a query of homes on Zillow and I'm looking for 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms, it has to say somewhere in the lines and columns, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, X square feet, X price. But to take photographs, which historically our human capability was that we can look at something as like a photograph and use our visual brain, visually driven brain to interpret that. But now you have artificial intelligence that can recognize patterns even in an unstructured environment like that, an image. I guess you've just blown my mind a little bit. I'm trying to come up with something like super witty to say in the moment. I guess I should just ask, like, can we dive into this a little bit deeper? So first I should ask, like, how mature is the tool? How do you think it's going to grow? And then what do you think are going to be the best, most exciting use cases for it?
Sure. Let me start with some exciting use cases, and then I'll work back into talking a bit more about, some of the exciting things and learning and findings that we've had having this in the market, because it is live. It has been live for, I believe, 7.5 months now. But I do want to use that opportunity to quickly touch on the supply side so we have context to go back into the consumer side. Because, as I mentioned, ecosystem. The same models, like I said before, that are doing this visual search and able to interact in an unstructured way with the general real estate market. We use the same structures and the same data sets, plus a lot more, to, on the real estate investor and soon developer side, allow them essentially a super robust version of that search, but to do deep property research. For example, if you're an investor looking to buy a multifamily that you then want to list those units on the Realm consumer site, you can use our fully agentic underwriting tool to essentially, in a nutshell, put in an address, run deep research, have a financial model that you can audit and see the 10 to 15 year projections on it, play around with assumptions, immediately generate an offer memorandum or a prospectus for investment, and actually take that and share that with all of the parties involved. So cutting a lot of costs there as well as a lot of time, because, and this is where I'm going to transition back into your exact question, if we can speed up the process with which supply gets on the market and save costs upstream, those units can then fill out the consumer side much quicker. That's why we have both kind of, not sides of it, because it is serving from the same brain, but both sides of the spectrum there from supply and demand. The reason we thought that was super important was, one, hopefully we can bring down costs for everyone involved, make the firms more money and make homes more accessible to people. But two, if our consumer search is successful, which it's proving to be, supply is going to be a limitation there. People are going to want more supply, which we already see that in the market. I mean, that's almost goes without saying here as we're sitting in September of 2025. We're the most supply constrained I think we've been in recent history in the US. But using that as a transition to get back to like why we think the search on the consumer side will be so successful there, as you were mentioning. Yeah, I think the best way to conceptualize how we think about it internally is that someone like a Zillow, where you have structured data, and Zillow is essentially just an advertising site. They're not a tech company. They never have been and never will be. And I will say that openly to anyone who's listening. They have lists of apartments. And if you think about it from a data perspective, there's only so many filters that you can go through on Zillow, or here in New York City, their subsidiary StreetEasy. Sure, there might be potentially, let's call it 1 million permutations of different filters you could put together. There still is a finite number of lists that you as the consumer can see, which means that necessarily many people are looking at the same lists of properties and endlessly scrolling through to find one that fits them. That also creates artificial layers of demand and competition, which increases price because, as I mentioned, if you're looking at the same list of properties from the same basic filters that I am, we're going to be competing on the same properties, even if we have slightly different utility from those properties that we need as the consumer. What Realm does is essentially every single, there is a truly infinite variety of searches that you can run, because it's all non-deterministic, all perfectly customized and personalized to you. And so instead of having a bunch of lists of properties that you as the user can filter by, what Realm does is it takes what you actually need as the person and allows properties to kind of like bubble into around you and form around your needs, rather than you trying to fit yourself to the properties that are on the market. And that creates a much better experience. And we've seen that play out in some of the results. For example, we've been in the market for, like I said, 7.5 months now, mostly in New York, but 15 other states served nationwide as a test for the rest of the market. And we've seen 55,000 people use it so far in the first 7 months. And of those 55,000, we convert those searchers to actual like agent and property outreach, people messaging to get into those apartments, over 7 times better, more efficiently than the industry average. And that's on their self-report, the other competitors' numbers, which are self-reported, and I'm sure a little inflated. We're outdoing them by such a staggering order of magnitude that it definitely vindicates and validates how efficient and better of an experience it is to simply describe what you're looking for and have that personalized, tailored search to get into the market.
I've realized that you've turned each of the users of this platform into their own real estate agent. 15 years ago, when Zillow was not the precedent for home buying or home searching, you would find someone and you'd hope that they knew the neighborhood. You'd find someone local and you say, I'm looking for a place with sidewalks out front and I want red shutters and big bushes in the front and a pool in the backyard. And someone say, well, I think I know the place for you. Then we moved over to Zillow, where we can browse the selection. We're looking through the pictures, but you have so many properties, so much unstructured data. You got to swipe through, you spend hours and hours. So now each person gets to almost instantaneously take on the role of that real estate agent, at least in the search process. I'm sure we'll get to the actual transaction at some point. It's inevitable that agents become obsolete. There's just no way around it, aside from the lobby, which is really stifling innovation. But Yeah, I think that's really, really cool. So one thing that we didn't do is I want to define agentic
Sure,
technologies, so what is that? And then how does that compare to traditional AI?
definitely. So I think it's worth noting there that though I have technical enough background to start this company, there are three co-founders of Realm. One of which I mentioned, Evan, our CEO, also um, about as equally technical as I am. We're enough to be dangerous, but not enough to be the full time CTO of the company. Certainly, our third co-founder, Ilya Nyshevsky, he's our CTO and co-founder, and he in the process of building this with him, I have learned so much more. I did not know what agentic meant before this. In fact, we started doing what I will hopefully explain well is agentic, AI, building agentic systems. We were doing that before the term agentic was coined. So I guess, we were a little bit first to the curve there. But I learned a lot about that in the process and by necessity of building Realm. And thank God for Ilya being part of the team to, instill all this kind of like bleeding edge technology into what we're doing. But the best way I can conceptualize like what agentic systems mean compared to traditional LLM or something, there's a few people that would disagree on the definition here, and they use it for a couple different things. Let me boil it down to two. Agentic, I've heard people use that term describing an AI that can take action for you. It's an agent that acts on your behalf. You could think of something like a cold calling agent, which you put in a list of, as a salesperson, you put in a list of prospects and it actually goes out and does things for you. That's one way I've heard agentic be used. When you talk about agentic systems, which is more what we work in, we definitely, real estate's an important thing. We want humans in the loop to make final decisions, certainly across the board. So we're not having AI agents go and purchase property for you or something. Not yet, at least. We'll talk again in 5 years, and we might be there. But the way that we use agentic systems is to have many different agents all interoperating with each other in kind of an institution of agents. Each agent being an LLM or some variation thereof, some AI or machine learning type system, and each one's tasked with something specific. One might be our visual search, another might be a location agent, understand where this person is talking about or where this investment property is. Another one might be tasked with simply pulling tax records for a property. But each one can be a specialized member of an AI organization, and those all funnel up to the final boss, the CEO agent or something at the top of that. That then is the final one that triages the whole process and communicates results back to the user. So really, the best TLDR version is an agentic system is just a bunch of AI agents working together in an institution to accomplish some more complex goal than a specific AI or LLM would be able to on its own.
There's got to be some trust issues that come along with this. It's new technology. You have something working almost autonomously. So I want to ask, how are you guys approaching this, especially when something like real estate really depends on recent and accurate information and then also understanding nuance, especially with that unstructured data? How are you guys going about that?
Yeah, I think the more important part of that is on that professional side that I was talking about. That we call it Realm Pro, the part of the platform that does deep property research and analysis, because that's where, as a consumer looking for an apartment, if we're slightly off on your description of what a cool apartment looks like, no harm, no foul. You're just going to disagree. But buying a property, we have agents that do full financial modeling and things like that. That's where it starts to get, as you mentioned, very precarious in the way that we have to do this right. We have to execute properly. But we certainly have many safeguards in there. We're not making any, like I said, decision on your behalf. These are simply tools to accelerate what you're already doing. And the human is fully in the loop on this. So, you as a real estate investor are buying or looking at a deal that's a multifamily building. We're never going to dictate what cap rate you should exit at or, what you should purchase the property for. But in your analysis, rather than building the entire 10-year financial projections, what we'll do is we'll go out and do a deep research on the internet to find, the rent price of every unit in that building, the rental history, the tax record, any expense reports that might be publicly available or that you as the user can provide and we can scan and actually use in the model. And we provide all of that automated for you to get to the solution and your point of decision quicker. So we just sit in between the origin of the deal and your decision making moment. We're not making decisions for you. We give you every opportunity to do things quicker, yes, significantly quicker and much cheaper, but to actually view the inputs and the outputs that you can go in and say, I disagree with this assumption, I'll just change it. So it's fully human in the loop, which is extremely important, especially in something like commercial real estate, not only because of the financial impact of these assets, but because the industry is very relational. It's all about relationships. People hear about deals from friends that they met 5, 10 years ago. And our goal in a nutshell is to get all of the tedious BS out of the way so that these people that are working in the industry can actually do deals the way that they should be, which is finding things, having the relationships and the network to actually build these deals together, and let us do the tedious part that's distracting from the end result, which is getting deals done so that units can get on the market so everyone involved can have a place to live and hopefully make some money along the way.
Super well said. That's a pitch right there. Well, I'll let you elaborate on that because as we start to wrap up here, I always give folks a call to action, and whether that's getting people onto the platform or you're looking for partnerships. But I think that early adopters have a very important role in shaping how an AI tool like this operates. So when people click on the link in the show notes and go check out your really cool tool, what should they expect and how are they actually playing into the bigger picture here?
Oh, definitely. So yeah, I guess the best way for someone to test out what we're doing and actually get their hands on what I've been talking about is to go to realm.ai, like you said, show notes below. Always wanted to do that. Click the link down below. It's my marketing background. But the best way is to just go to that website. That is our consumer home search. Try it out. Put in something fun. There really is no limit. You don't have to limit yourself to what you've been told and dictated to by someone like Zillow that you have to be in these boxes. Venture outside the box. Look for something that is maybe you don't even want to live there. Have fun. Tell the agent to respond like Tony Soprano. Anything that you want to play around with it, just push it to its limits and see what happens. Of course, there is a support box. So if you find something that you think is interesting or maybe doesn't work the way you as a user might expect it to, we take that feedback very seriously and we're constantly going through users' notes there. For anyone that's a real estate professional listening to this, which I'm sure we will likely have quite a few, we're currently in private beta test with the professional side of the platform, really dialing in the deep functionality. And we've been fortunate enough that there's been many commercial real estate firms of various capacities that have been investors in Realm, and as soon as they heard the vision, wanted to get involved. And they've been very instrumental in testing the platform and making sure that it is dialed in so that when it goes out to publicly available sign up, everyone has an amazing experience using this and everybody can get deals done quicker and better. So if you're interested in being a private beta tester for that, I'm sure that my LinkedIn will be in the bio as well. I'm on there arguably too much. So send me a note. Always happy to talk to people about being an early user, testing it out, and seeing what features we can add to make this thing significantly more powerful.
Cool. Well, I'm going to give you one more CTA. Is there anyone in the industry that you're looking for? Because we were talking about ecosystems and needing to collaborate with others. Are there partnerships or corporations, startups, whatever, that would make a good fit alongside Realm?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest thing is anyone that is involved in real estate investment or development. Those are people that we would love to talk to. Those are the people we actively talk to all day, every day. My co-founder Evan and I are constantly on meetings and in person with these firms. Anyone that has a stake in that part of the industry, we would love to talk to you in any capacity. Whether you're interested in using Realm or just curious to know more, we're always open to talk.
Definitely going to have your information in the show notes. And then as a little call out to all of our fans, everyone who's been listening across all the platforms, if you want to help Jackson and all the other fantastic speakers that we have, a 5-star rating after you listen to this episode helps us a lot, really elevates the whole show, attracts a lot of organic reach. And more recently, I just had someone reach out to me. They said, well, you know what? I found your episodes on YouTube and I want to do business with you. And so it's just really awesome to see how far the show has gone. So we want to continue that momentum. But back to you, Jackson. Really love the conversation. Looking forward to following your journey. I know that we're connected on LinkedIn and just seeing how this evolves and how the data, big data in real estate continues to get captured, processed, and activated. Most importantly, that's the big key word for the next couple of years, how the activations occur. So thanks for sharing
Absolutely.
the time and your wisdom with all of us today. And I look forward to the next convo.
Thanks again, Matt. I appreciate you setting this up. And I'm looking forward to doing an annual check-in with the podcast and let them know how everything at Realm's going.
That would be perfect. We'll have you as a reoccurring guest.
Love it. I've just invited myself onto your podcast. So
yeah. Hey, well, you're the first to do it. Fortune favors the bold.
There we go.
All right.
Thanks again, man.
Take care.